I'm David Sarnoff. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships and an Executive Coach with Loeb Leadership. I've coached and presented on a variety of topics, including feedback, emotional intelligence, workplace conflict, organizational culture, and communication and collaboration. I'm a former attorney. I was in executive search for many years and was a partner in a search firm. And I'm also a past president of the Board of Education in Fort Lee. I am grateful for this opportunity to speak with you today and hope that you find value in what we discuss today. And I want everybody to feel free to participate and post questions and comments in the chat box. And Lana will present the questions when she feels it appropriate. And I'm certainly willing to stay extra afterwards. So if anybody has questions or would like to discuss the topic, I'd be happy to do that. I see we have a good spread of baby boomers and Gen X and millennials, so that's great to see. So why this topic? For me, this topic is so important. Lana, can we mute everybody? So this topic is incredibly important. For the first time in the history of the world, we have 5 generations in the workplace at the same time. And we have traditionalists who were born before 1946. They were influenced by the Great Depression and World War II. And we have baby boomers whose parents were returning from war and wanted a better life for their kids. And they were born from 1946 to 1964. And then Gen X, which is my generation, was born 65 to 1980. And they experienced an infusion of 2 working parents in the workplace, and they were known as the latchkey generation. I was one of those kids. After school, I came home to a house with no adults because both parents were working, and that influenced how I was raised. Gen Y or millennials are born 1981 to 2000. They're the majority of the workplace now, and they're growing into leadership roles and executive roles. And we have Gen Z, which is born after 2000, and they're just getting into their early 20s now, and they're entering the workforce as well. Working virtually highlights many of these generational differences. I mean, communicating effectively in person is very challenging, and now adding the extra layer of doing it remotely under these current circumstances certainly adds an extra layer of difficulty. And you know, everybody should be treated as individuals and taken for who they are, but there's a lot of research and studies on generations and generational characteristics, and there are differences in how we prefer to communicate and how we like to receive information and how we give and receive feedback. Some people like it in person. Some people want to be on the phone. Others like to text or use email. So I think it's very important, especially in the times we're living in right now, that we focus on this, and we need to raise awareness of how different generations prefer to communicate if we want to be effective managers, leaders, and effective individual contributors. We need to provide an understanding and gain an understanding of how different generations flex their styles, prefer to give and receive feedback. So what's in it for you? For me, everything. I don't want to seem like I'm an alarmist, but I think understanding how critical this topic is for your professional success is tantamount. Companies are in very difficult circumstances right now, and they are making decisions based on information that is changing rapidly. And how you're perceived as somebody who's a good collaborator, a good communicator, can impact whether or not you remain on the team, or if there's going to be a furlough. If you have a reputation as being somebody who's difficult to work with, who resists change, who doesn't adapt, is not agile, that's going to be weighed in the decisions companies are making. Look, furloughs and layoffs are inevitable, and a lot of great performers are unfortunately losing their jobs because of business circumstances. But if you have these skills, it can position you for that next opportunity in how you're able to articulate it and show up. So as organizations change and their projections and outlooks change on a daily basis, they're going to look for the most adaptable, the most agile, and their most effective communicators to be part of their team going forward. And these skills are critical in team building, in negotiation. You may need to negotiate about your safety going forward and the safety of your team. So how you've cultivated relationships, how you're able to influence others, it is an amazing skill no matter what, but under these circumstances, it raises its profile. So critical skills. These are the critical skills I would like to discuss today. So understanding your mindset, okay? What do you bring to the equation as far as how you see things, how you deal with obstacles and challenges? Elevating self-awareness, how you show up, how you're perceived by others, I think is one of the most critical skills in not only professional, but also in personal life that people just don't focus on enough. Improving your communication and listening skills. Listening skills to me are as vital as what you say to others. Your ability to be present and focus on what somebody else is trying to convey to you, and understanding the value of giving and receiving feedback. Feedback provides incredible information and data for individuals to adjust their styles or how they operate. And that makes you a more effective performer. It makes you a more effective leader and a manager of others. So let's start going into that. So understanding other generations. I'm just going to briefly describe this because there's tons and tons of research and data on this. So as a brief overview, traditionalists, grew up during very difficult circumstances. They're hardworking, they're loyal employees, they respect authority, they're not wasteful, okay? Those are typically their characteristics, and they're also less likely to embrace change, and they like doing things the way they've been done. Baby boomers, their reputation are they're workaholics, they're independent, they like competition, and they believe in a hierarchy, and they work hard to attain those positions. They also have difficulty adjusting to change. And Gen X, they're the ones who actually introduced the concept of work-life balance, but they also work fairly hard. They're independent, resourceful, and they like to work by themselves quite often. Just to share one anecdotal story, I was coaching an associate who is a millennial, and she shared with me that she was having difficulty with one of the partners and explaining where her mindset was. And she said, look, I want to be a good lawyer and I want to perform and sharpen my skills, but I don't want to make the sacrifices that partners made. I don't want to give up the hours and hours of my life that they gave up to achieve the title and role of partner. But they said it doesn't mean I want to work any less hard or be as productive, but they don't want to work till 10, 11 o'clock at night. They don't want to give up their weekends. Again, that was this individual, but we hear that as a regular theme, and that presents opportunities for managers and leaders to engage their teams and understand where their perspectives are coming from. So let's talk about mindset. So Carol Dweck, who's a psychologist, wrote a book called Mindset, and she breaks it down into two categories. We have people who have a fixed mindset and people who have a growth mindset. And those with a fixed mindset, they stay in a very narrow lane. They believe they've learned everything they need to learn to do their job well. They resist change. They don't rebound from failure. They're less resilient. And people with a fixed mindset in this environment are going to have a difficult time. Paradoxically, people with growth mindsets, they are open to learning new things. They see failure as an opportunity to learn. They're resilient. They're good collaborators and communicators. They want to learn new skills. They're adaptable. In this environment, people with growth mindset are going to adapt to where the workflow is. They believe you can learn new technical skills. And that's really important, because having that growth mindset will allow you to fill roles that you didn't previously believe you were either skilled to do or wanted to do. But it's something you may have to do. And now let's talk about self-awareness. And I think this is the most important thing. And I believe people need to spend more time doing this. So I want to start with what we see here is known as the Johari window. And the Johari window was created by two psychologists in the 1950s, Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingham. And so some people call it Johari and some people call it Johari. But this is a tool to raise self-awareness. So if we look in that upper left-hand box, we see it's titled the open box. Now, these are things that are known to myself and known to others. So right now, I'm presenting in this workshop. I'm wearing my Loeb leadership sweatshirt. I know that, and you know that. That's information that's open to both of us. Below the open window, it's what's known as the hidden window. Now, this is information that is known to me, but not known to others until I'm ready to share it. So one of those pieces of information would be, most people don't know that I have a twin sister. That was hidden until I make it open. Now, the more you share in the hidden box, the more opportunity you have to build relationships, build trust. You let other people get to know you better. Now, when we go to the upper right-hand box, the blind box, and my colleague David Robert, he really instilled in me that this is where people should live. I mean, bring your sleeping bag, bring your pillow, get comfortable in the blind box, because this is the information that really contributes to our individual growth and our ability to see how we're perceived and how we show up. So the blind box is information that is unknown to myself, but others know about me. And this can be intimidating. People become vulnerable. My colleague Gordon Loeb refers to this as the spinach in the teeth. So if we're at dinner and I get food stuck in my teeth, that's apparent to everybody but myself. You know that about me, but I don't know that about me. And I'd want to know, but some people might be hesitant to share that information with me because they don't want to embarrass me or they don't want to create conflict. So whether or not I have spinach in my teeth isn't necessarily going to impact my life, but where information in the blind box can be detrimental, is an example such as we're in a meeting and afterwards somebody comes to me and says, David, you interrupted multiple times, and those interruptions really took us off task, and we were up against serious deadlines, and as a result of that, we're now behind the gun. So that I may not have been aware of how I was impacting my team. But when you have a high trust environment where you encourage giving and receiving feedback for the benefit of the team, not to put anybody down, not to attack anybody, but to actually use it as a development tool so we all improve and get better, that's the ideal. we should seek out that information. We should ask people, how am I doing? Did I do anything that I could have done better? Knowing information that's in the blind window is significantly important to our growth and development and our ability to interact with others. We want to expand that blind window as much as possible. Okay, and the last box is the unknown box. That's information I don't know and others don't know. And an example is what we're going through right now. Who would have known how we would react in a global pandemic and lockdown conditions until you're actually in it? And then once we're in it, we see how ourselves and how others respond to stress, respond to obstacles, respond to anxiety. And please, if you have any questions or comments, please post them in the chat box. And I've frozen up. Bear with me one moment, please.
David, your screen is shared now.
Now, you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so how we communicate. So how we communicate is vitally important to the equation. So there was a a very well-known UCLA professor named Albert Mehrabian, and he did a significant amount of study and research on this. And some people challenge the breakdown of the specific numbers, but they're widely accepted that the majority of how we communicate has very little to do with what we say and very much to do with how we show up, how we appear, what our body language is. As you can see, over half our communication is appearance and body language. Over a third is our tone, our pitch, the volume of our voice. And it's incredibly important to be self-aware of that. Again, these are difficult things to do in an in-person environment, and now we're doing it remotely. We're doing it on video. We're doing it through email and phone calls. So please be mindful of, do you roll your eyes? Do you sigh deeply? Do you come across too loud, intimidating? If you feel others are doing that, are you willing to share that feedback? Be mindful of our volume and our tone. This is all very critical to building that collaborative, cohesive team, and we'll see how it applies generationally. So why is it difficult for many people to communicate? And a lot of it has to do with being present and being focused. So the average person, according to this Harvard Business Review article, but there's many other sources, the average person speaks at a rate of about 125 words per minute, but the brain processes many more words than that, almost over 3 times as much. So when somebody's talking to us, our brain is actually looking for more information and distractions to fill the capacity. And if somebody's talking to you and you grab your phone and start checking text messages or sending emails, that creates conflict, okay? That is not showing respect, showing you value the other person, and it certainly interferes with our ability to communicate well, and it interferes with our ability to build a collaborative environment. So now we get to active listening, and active listening should be an Olympic sport. It requires exertion. It is physical, okay? To actively listen means you are present, you are focused on the person, you are not distracted, okay? You demonstrate this by asking questions about what the person has said. You rephrase their statements to indicate that you understand them thoroughly, okay? And you do not check your phone, you do not send emails. Again, difficult to do in an in-person setting, vital to do in a remote virtual setting. So now, how does this all tie together to generations? So the traditionalists prefer that in-person or on the phone communication. They're not looking for the pat on the back. If no news is good news to them, they only want feedback if they feel they need to do something better. Baby boomers, on the other hand, they prefer that feedback in person, and if they have to, they'll do it on the phone. They tend to be very diplomatic in delivering feedback, but they prefer to receive very direct feedback as to, you know, what they need to do to improve. It doesn't have to be sugar coated. And Gen X prefers phone calls or email for communicating, and they are direct in their communication style in delivering feedback. They cut right to the point. They want it to be impactful. They are looking for meaningful feedback to help improve their skills and their performance. And millennials prefer text messages and instant messaging. They're the generation of the helicopter parent. They were very scheduled, very managed growing up, and they want continuous feedback. And of all the characteristics of generations, this is the one I hear the most from executives and partners, that they're always asked, you know, how am I doing? How did you like that? But continuous feedback, and they want the feedback to be positive. And I had one other executive share an experience with me where they emailed a younger member of their team a question, and the person responded in a text. And it drove this executive crazy. He said, if I send an email, I want an email reply. I don't want a text. And that was a great opportunity to give feedback, open a line of communication about how we prefer to receive information. And Gen Z, they're good social media communicators. But in the workplace, they're kind of swinging back to Gen X. They are comfortable with face-to-face communication, and they prefer to give direct feedback, but in a private setting, not in front of others. And why is feedback important? Delivering candid feedback with the spirit of bringing out the best in others. This is what builds trust among team members. When it's encouraged to give and receive feedback, and we've developed that vulnerability-based trust, then that feedback is meant in the spirit of elevating everybody, not tearing anybody down, not looking to embarrass people. And when you have that culture and that climate within your organization or within your team, you're really destined for great things, because you're challenging each other, you're innovating, and studies show when you have diverse, multiple generational teams, they are highly innovative, creative, and when you have a culture of encouraging feedback, people are learning all the time. And especially for managers and leaders and executives, you have to model the behavior you expect of others. So when you yourself ask for feedback, that's just demonstrating your vulnerability and how you're also looking to improve and grow. There's a leadership program called the Leadership Challenge, and it was created by two professors in California, Barry Posner and Jim Kouzes, and it's widely used program in corporate world. They have an assessment of 30 leadership behaviors, and over 3 million people have taken this assessment. But there's one behavior that's in the least frequent of over 90% of the people who've taken the assessment, and that's asking for feedback as to how my performance impacts you. So,
David,
yes.
we have a question.
Sure.
If you don't mind, I'd like to have it asked, or I'd like to ask it on behalf of the participant.
Sure.
When you meet someone, how do you know what generation they're in?
Well, you know, I would start by asking some questions just to see what they're familiar with. You know, sometimes you could ask, you know, sometimes people are uncomfortable saying, how old are you? But you know, if you can't tell immediately by looking at somebody, I think engaging them in a conversation and getting to know them, and maybe the more you do that, the more comfortable you are with each other, and there's a trust that builds between the two of you, then you might be able to be more direct, or you can ask questions about how they grew up and what technologies are they most comfortable with, and those types of questions might give you an indication of where they fit in.
Thank you.
And I hope that was satisfactory. And for me, this quote by Maya Angelou really ties everything together. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I find that in my life experience, the leaders who I admire and respect the most were the ones who were humble, who were respectful, who were incredibly gracious, and they weren't pompous or arrogant. They weren't dividers and destroyers. They were uniters, and they collaborated. And somebody gave me a story recently about a Navy SEAL who gives speeches and does motivational stuff. And he said, look, when times are calm, generals should lead from the rear and let the younger officers get experience. But when things get into a crisis mode and they're difficult, generals should lead from the front and model the way. So I really believe servant leaders is the model I strive for. Like Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last, and showing compassion and empathy and being humble is so incredibly important, especially in these times where employee anxiety is at a very high level. Our own survey of the legal industry showed that general anxiety and isolation and loneliness were the most challenging things to employees. So managers and leaders really need to focus on the wellness and mindfulness and mindset of their teams and themselves. And in the spirit of the Daily Show, I'd like to leave you with a moment of Zen. This is my view. Photography is my therapy. That was a sunrise a couple weeks ago. And sometimes we really do need to just take time and take a deep breath and meditate, or just find some outlet that is a stress reliever where we can just unplug for a while and enjoy and be grateful for the good things in our life. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Again, I am grateful. I really appreciate and enjoyed this opportunity, and I welcome your questions. I would love to engage with people on what worked, what didn't, what were your takeaways. And here's my contact, and please feel free to give me some questions and comments.
All right, David, I also wanted to let everybody know that I have added the copy of today's presentation in the Zoom chat. I also added an article that Loeb Leadership wrote on the generational disconnect that may be helpful or useful, or you may want to reference. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to David. Please feel free to reach out to myself if there's anything else we can do for you. Thank you.